It's the big one. France are currently en route to Dublin, the Six Nations title in their sight. The hosts aware a win on Saturday will put one hand on the tournament trophy for a weekend to go. And so, after what say has been a complicated week with complications that have changed our plan quite last second to look at Wales v Ireland, we decided to instead sit down and dig into just where Saturday we won and lost. But first, just what is at stake?
It is almost certainly going to be the tournament decider. Even if there is a chance that one of these two teams doesn't win the Six Nations, this match is going to tell us. Ireland currently sit in the driver's seat, 14 points on the table. France behind them on 11. England on 10 could yet win the championship if France win this Saturday. So we have a tournament that could be wide open. We could be going to the final weekend with all teams on 15 points. It's a hugely exciting prospect, but I think this game might be somehow even more exciting than that potential Super Saturday tournament title dash.
Yeah, it's a great one because there's so many possibilities of what could happen, the various results that could come of this, that what France need to do to win the tournament, right? If they win this game without getting a try bonus point and let's say Ireland get a losing bonus point.
A 4-1 win.
Yeah, a 4-1 win because, let's be honest, it's probably going to be a really close game.
Yeah.
That if France win, that's the most likely manner in which they do it. That would then take it to both teams looking for a bonus point win on the final day and looking for a load of points difference. And I love when that happens in the Six Nations because it means that there is something on every try that's being scored. Even if Ireland-Italy ends up being a blowout, there is something on exactly how much of a blowout it is.
With England doing the exact same in Cardiff as well. So France currently sit ahead. They are 60-odd points ahead of Ireland on points difference and 90-odd ahead of England. So they've got the advantage here, which puts extra importance on Ireland. So Ireland are potentially looking at the world because the points margin is so vast they've got to make up that they're probably looking at a Grand Slam or bust here. And this game is absolutely all or nothing. So I want to dig into the game a little bit. As we record this, we haven't seen the Irish team sheet. However, we're expecting a largely similar team and we're expecting Sam Prendergast at 10. And I think he is important for a number of reasons, but a lot of the discourse is focused around Sam Prendergast being the fly half as a contest against Jack Crowley rather than what this tells us about Ireland's game plan, right? And we have seen Ireland, this Six Nations, move away from the way they've been playing for the last few years, right? In 2023, you had generally teams kick the ball a lot after third or fourth phase. The statistics showed you at the time that once you got beyond phase 4, the chance of you scoring a try went down every single phase and got greater and greater, each phase you played beyond that. Ireland were the only team, therefore, that kept hold of the ball. Everyone else went, well, we're no longer going to score a try, so we might as well kick it away and look to get it back downfield or when they kick it back or whatever. Ireland just went, fine, screw it. We'll keep going because we believe in our system. That is no longer the case. Ireland's phase count has come down enormously. To give you a stat, right? In 2024, Ireland went through an average of 137 phases per game. Okay? In 2025, they're currently averaging 101 per game.
Wow.
So down 36, down more than a quarter of the phases they were playing through before are gone from their game. They've drastically reduced their phase count. And if you look at them, right, the 4 longest phases of play in that Ireland-Wales game were all Wales. Ireland didn't really look to get beyond 5 phases outside of the opposition 22 at all during the game. Their approach to how and when they play has changed enormously, even if their shape and structure is broadly exactly the same.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you think of... I think we're quite brainwashed by Ireland because they've played such a similar brand of rugby that's been so effective for about 5 or 6 years now.
Yeah.
And now suddenly this Six Nations, seeing that their phase count is down, seeing that they're suddenly really low on amount of carries made, amount of meters made, amount of tackles broken, just as a team. And you just have it in your head that they do because, they've got Caelan Doris, he busts loads of tackles. They've got Bundy Archie, he always fends people off and evades people and so on. But actually, that's not a reflection on them doing worse things in attack. They're doing exactly the same stuff in attack as they've largely done, but they're attacking less. That they're instead kicking a lot more. Against Wales, you'd find moments where Gibson Park kicks when it looks like they maybe got an overlap. You know? It looks like the wrong option. Obviously, in a way, it's the right option. There's no real way of knowing because The idea is it's so they can, and we've used this analogy a lot, but buy another ticket for the raffle that they're entering. Yeah, the lottery. Meaning that they can just set up camp in the opposition 22 and just bang on the door there.
You would rather score 5 tries from 10 entries to the 22 than 4 tries from 4.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think people have got very hung up on conversion rate in the 22. What Ireland are looking to do instead is just to always live down there. I want to pull up an example of how the two teams might kick, if that's all right, from the game 2 years ago. And the interesting thing is, France now have changed a lot about how they attack. Watching this game back was bizarre because both teams have changed so much, but Ireland have changed drastically. So here, France set up just out their own 22, right? One stat I do want to pull up from this year's championship. France's exit success rate, 96%.
Wow.
Which is insane, which is unbelievably high. They are the highest, best in the championship by a long distance. So France look to exit. France still kick this way. They use Dupont, they hang it long off 9, and look, send wingers up to chase and a full line up. They're not even like England do, looking to have the catch and bring it down, then you smash them and you attack them following breakdown. They will kick long, and they'll look to put some pressure on, create a defensive line, hoping that you kick it back.
Yeah.
Right? So what Ireland do here is they take it in, they run a phase, they carry up, and then Sexton, as it was at the time, remember that guy, calls a play, they play it wide, James Lowe hoofs it down, and Thomas Ramos is suddenly under pressure on his own try line, and he does something insane. And for one of the very rare times, he gets called out and Dupont gets tackled behind the try line. Will be a 5-metre scrum, gets called back because Ramos actually puts a foot in touch beforehand. This is the pressure game Ireland used to play. Now, we've seen it change. So probably in the situation instead, Prendergast instead of Sexton, though basically same person, probably kicks themselves right after Doris carries. Most likely contestable, but they may just stick it down the same touchline that Lowe kicks down and try and catch Ramos in that position, look for kind of 50-22 attempt, or put Ramos in an awkward position as Lowe does. What we're seeing is Ireland kick contestable much more. They're using Mac Hansen an awful lot as a follow-up chaser, partly because he's really good in the air, partly because he can jump incredibly high, but I think a large part because he's small, because he allows you to kind of sneak by. You don't notice Mac Hansen running that trail line behind your 10, and therefore, it's one of the things about Prendergast, his body language is incredibly good. He's so good at disguising one type of kick and changing it into another. So sometimes you'll see him and you think, like, oh, he's going for a trip here, and he'll hang it in the air.
Or he takes the ball so close to the line and flings a miss pass or something. There's that stat that in Europe he has the most line break assists this season because it's so hard to tell whether he's going for that little lift ball on the outside, whether he's going for the long one across the face or the little cross field that he's so fond of. All of those. And also the fact the guy's bringing the spiral kick back into fashion. But that's so unique to how Ireland kick the ball. And I think that is it, that they are having such a range of kicks that they're bringing at the moment. You mentioned there, JGP's really good at the aerial contest where they're using Lowe and Hansen a lot more now. I think they used to use Lowe and Hansen a lot more as the left foot, right foot kickers and use them as kind of bonus fly halves on the wings. Whereas now, as you say, they use a little bit more as actual wingers. Than previous.
They use as wingers, but they use them in the middle of the pitch as the usual winger role that would take place on the wing.
And it's helpful off line out that they have Dan Sheehan can then drop and stand on the touchline there and so on. With that, there's, again, not to bring it back to the Crowley-Prendergast debate, but like the way Crowley kicks is a lot more similar to how Gibson Park likes to kick. That he's very good in the aerial one. And I think they've just kind of gone, well, Gibson Park can do that. When we want to go instinctive, want to go long, get a kick that's going to bounce, or get, that spiral kick that's really difficult to catch, Prendergast has mastered that already.
A stat brought up by Murray Kinsella, but the longest kick of this domestic or international season so far was put in by Sam Prendergast against Scotland. Like, the kid has an enormous boot, and I think that comes enormously back to why he's playing, because Ireland have completely changed and twisted their kicking game around him and what he can do. So they're playing a lower phase count, but they're playing it down in the opposition 22. They're looking to control territory, looking to control less possession, more just where the game is being played. But it still remains about momentum and about keeping themselves on top at all times. Yeah,
another clip I want to quickly look at that contrasts the two kicking games as well. Perhaps tipping the scales in the opposite favour to what you were just doing there. So this one from the Champions Cup final, which is the closest thing we've had to the current fixture at the moment, because a lot of the best players on each team in common here.
Santiago Chocobaras obviously will be...
Yes. Jack Willis, no doubt. No. But it's the last time, of course, Dupont and Gibson Park played against each other. Gibson Park here sticks the ball in the air, really good kick. It gives both Joe McCarthy and Jordan Lama a chance to get under it. Unfortunately, they both overshoot and miss the ball on this occasion. Ramos comes up with it. And His groundwork is great. He flops straight to the floor, gets the ball back straight away. And again, instinctively, and I'm going to use that word a lot to talk about how France like to kick, and same with how Toulouse like to kick. Dupont just looks up straight away, knows that Gibson Park's still dropping back from his kick. There's no actual winger there to cover it. And he sticks it on his right foot. There's nobody in position to block here, as Leinster often would. A lot of teams will stick their second row in there to try and block the kicker. Instead, Caelan Doris is still on the retreat, can't really get his arms out to block the kick. So Dupont sends it really low, and it's a hard scuddering kick across the floor, and it beats Gibson Park into touch, and it gets the 50-22 in extra time. Really important kick there. And now, the thing is, that sounds like I'm just praising Dupont, of course I am, but on the other hand, on another attempt, right, you've got Mac Hansen there instead of Jordan Lama, who, with all due respect to Jordan Lama, Mac Hansen's better on the kick chase, which is why he's in the Ireland team over him.
Amongst other reasons.
Amongst other reasons. But another time, that could deflect back onto the Leinster/Irish side and open up that unstructured scenario that allows them to just play really quickly and get Caelan Doris punching through those holes. I'll summarise, in short, right, Ireland are more fond of an aerial contest, but they now have that huge arsenal of kicks, largely thanks to Prendergast playing at 10. France are kind of refusing to get into that trend that's happening in international rugby. They prefer to bang it long with the Ramos and the Ntamack.
I haven't checked the exact stat on this, but I believe France have only hung 3 contestable bombs all championship so far. This is not their game, you know. They will kick long in the hope that you kick it back rather than looking to contest in the air, which is the interesting thing, because watching that game back from 2 years ago, they hung a handful on Ireland, which were contestable, and they sent Demortier and Penaud up after, against the likes of mostly Hansen, which I thought was interesting. That's gone completely from their game. There's been that very, very definite shift. The one thing I do think we're going to see is a huge increase in the amount of kicking. So again, to bring up another stat, right? The game last year, the average amount of kicks in the Six Nations game last year was about 35 kicks per game. The game between Ireland and France, it was 39 kicks to 37, right? So both teams above the average. But the more telling one is that game 2 years ago when they did have Dupont, when it was a proper contest, last time they played in Dublin. The average in that tournament was 28 kicks per game. The kicking stats that day were Ireland made 39 kicks, France made 41.
Right.
Both teams were more than 10 above the average at that point. And a large part of this is the same thing we saw in the Champions Cup final of 2 teams shutting each other down incredibly well. However, the other side is we have 2 teams that like to play a lot of attacking rugby, right? So you've got Ireland at the minute, I think will probably play similar in that they will look to pin the ball back and look to play possession rugby, almost old school Ronan O'Gara rugby, but instead of the ball rolling out because teams cover the 50-22 so well, they're so desperate on this. France in particular like to leave extra men in the backfield. They like to have their wingers in the backfield much more than almost any other team in the Six Nations this year at the minute. They will be looking to cover for that threat. So what you're looking to do, instead of the ball bouncing out as O'Gara used to do back in the day, Prendergast is sending it long generally so that it will bounce up and the opposition will, either kick it back or get trapped or get caught, if it's a high bomb hanging on it. I think we're going to see a lot of that. But on the inverse, I think France are probably going to continue kicking in exactly the same way they did, but we might see them start to kick more around halfway. Because this has been, I think, a big criticism since Laurent Labide left and Patrice Alcazaz came in as the attack coach, is Labide believed in counter-attack as the core way to break teams open.
Yeah.
It was the core of his attack, was you look to create unstructured situations. And you look at the try they just scored in that game in 2023, right? That came from a counter-attack. That came from a loose ball situation. France have built some really interesting structures. Again, another thing that stood out from watching that game back from 2 years ago is how much wider France used to play. France now will play quite close to the ruck. They have forwards right around the ruck to give Dupont more options. Back then, they played far more standard rugby where there'd be a wide pod off, and then you'd have the 10 set there. Now, everything is built so much more around Dupont than it was even just 2 years ago.
Like using him as the 10 almost, that you see a lot of teams. Will just flood loads of options around 10 because, let's be honest, every single defence will look at the opposition 10 and go, I'm going to melt them, right? Yeah. And so people go, great, let's give them a lift ball on the inside, lift ball on the outside, across the face, and just a standard one stood 3 or 4 metres away from him. Instead, France run that around Dupont. It worked a lot in the Italy game. They scored a lot of tries through getting Italy to bite in on him, and if they didn't, getting Dupont to go himself and then having offloads off him. We saw that in the autumn, that they did that a lot against the All Blacks, until the All Blacks start to mark him up properly and kept him a little bit quieter in the second half. The kind of question around that is, and I will confess, I don't really know the answer to this. Which of these many techniques do you think Ireland will attempt to adopt? Because I think every team in the Six Nations so far has taken a different method of trying to stop Dupont. Yes. The most effective one of those, of the three so far, was England, and yet Dupont still set up 3 tries in that game.
Yeah, created 3 tries and easily could have been 6.
And England did well to limit that to 3.
And yet it was the most effective means of shutting him down we've seen in Test rugby other than the All Blacks.
Yeah. And I'm not doing this as a Dupont glaze. I'm doing it from an Irish perspective.
Yeah.
What do you think they will do as a means of getting on top of that area around the 9 channel?
So we know they will absolutely for certain be talking about this right now. They will have a plan in place, right? And you look at that Champions Cup final, Leinster couldn't do that. That game was decided because they couldn't take Dupont out of the game. And they managed to in attack, but defensively, he is so vital for them. I think one big factor there is and I talked about this in the autumn, but France do not defend in the same way Toulouse do. So they often have Dupont covering for positions in which they are weaker otherwise. So like, if they've got someone else in the backfield, Dupont will cover the wing, or he'll sometimes fill in as like an extra centre if they need that, whatever.
Or an extra flanker even.
Yeah. That's just the Sean Edwards system, right? Is if you're light somewhere, the scrum half fills in there. For Toulouse, they built their defence a little bit around Dupont because he is so good at shooting out a line and making big reads. He's so good at the breakdown, which is critical. We're not seeing that for France, right? And I think you ask in terms of Ireland's defence what they can do to stop Dupont. I think part of the interesting thing is they know Dupont is less of a threat when they've got the ball. I think part of that is, do they play more phase count? Do they play in their own, the opposition half where Dupont can't get involved other than looking for charge down attempts, which he loves to do. Loves to really fly out and go for that. And then beyond that, once France do get the ball, I think the approach is maybe less to worry about Dupont and more to worry about the number of runners that come off him. And that's probably the way I think Ireland will look to play, looking at their fishnet defence, right? Their, the lobster pot, I think they called it, where like you can get in, but you're not getting back out, once you get trapped in.
And do you think it is maybe just a case of sometimes you have to bait Dupont into the hard carry that he loves himself, and see if you can trap a Van der Fleer behind that, you can steal the ball off him sometimes?
That's it. That's the question, isn't it? Because France have so many enormous runners. Their pack is bigger than Ireland's. The easiest way to stop that is by not letting it get to them.
Yeah.
However, that involves Dupont holding the ball instead.
Yeah, and there's 2 sides to this because one, Ireland love that blast of the breakdown to really disrupt opposition ball. It's one of Van der Fleer's specialities, very much the same with Doris and the majority of their pack. That could make things very messy for France, but obviously Dupont tends to thrive off that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to stop talking about Dupont right there, okay? Romain Ntamack comes back in.
Exactly where I was going to go next. Because Romain Ntamack, I've said this countless times, is maybe the most patient 10 in the world. He will sit off and he will wait. And again, I talked about this when we did Love of Rugby with Ben Youngs, but where Jalabert or even Thomas Ramos want the ball through their hands consistently, Romain Ntamack would be perfectly happy if he didn't touch the ball in the game.
Yeah.
Right? Or if he touched the ball twice, and both of those, though, he throws like a brilliant long pass over the top and he does a cross kick that they score off. Like, he is unbelievably patient. The other thing about Ntamack is he knows Antoine Dupont inside out. And normally, when you think about that, you think, they run great lines off each other, and they do. We talked about that in the Six Nations preview. Or they're always thinking the same wavelength, and they know the option of one's going to make, whatever.
Sure.
But a big part of this is, for example, normally if a cross kick is on, right, the 10 drops into the pocket and calls it and gives the kick to the winger from the scrum half, right? Ntamack knows not to do that because he knows Dupont will spot it himself and go for it himself, right?
Yeah.
So you often see in those situations for Toulouse, Ntamack will start to float out and he'll kind of like wrap around and be a second option that inside defenders have got to watch. So he isn't that threat, right?
Or he'll set something up on the other side.
Yeah.
He'll start talking to the opposite winger, saying, I'm going to throw you a long ball, so the backfield don't cover the actual one that Dupont's going to do.
Yeah, because he essentially gives you 2 lethal options because you don't need your 10 doing that, and therefore you don't need your centres and your wingers watching it. So if you're Henshaw or Arkey, then you are having to watch an extra threat, right? And you're then communicating that to your winger, that they're having to watch for this, you're there having to keep an eye out for this, and they're not solely watching the cross kick. He just adds an extra layer onto the French attack with that patience and with that core understanding of how Dupont plays the game.
Yeah, and with all of this in mind, we've talked a lot before about, like Ramos has moved from 10 to 15. I imagine actually his role won't change much from what it was in the Italy game. Once again, he's gained a real patience with in attack, at least. In his own 22, I don't think patient is a word I would use to describe Thomas Ramos. But the other big change is Damien Penaud coming back in the wing for Teo Atisogbe. I assumed that it was a case of giving Atisogbe a go against Italy where he can rack up some tries. A really good experience for a winger like him. I think he had a brilliant game playing alongside Beep Beep. Whereas here, once again, I can't help but wonder if this is a case of get them to kick into our backfield and see what opens up for Penaud.
Yeah.
You know, that, as you say, like, it was the case under Labie, is less the case now, but it's still a little bit, you know, that a lot of the French attack, it's based on the presumption that at some point in the 80 minutes, something is going to open up for one of these boys.
Something's going to be loose.
Yes. And Penaud coming back in with outside the quite assured centre combo of Barassi and Morfana, who've worked really well so far the Six Nations. I think that kind of adds an element of chaos, which I'm quite excited for.
Yeah. There are stats we've thrown up countless times of 2023, Penaud broke more tackles than times he got tackled. He didn't have his best game against England, but that's because he has been consistently having his best game for Bordeaux. You know, he was on, what was it, like 10 tries in 2 games or something ridiculous, 3 games coming into this championship. So the fact that he hasn't scored 18,000 tries is ludicrous. Incidentally, Bielbire and Dupont are both on to break the record for most tries and assists combined in the Six Nations ever in this game with a round to go. Like, if they're involved in, I think, 2 each, they'll both have broken that record full time.
That's massive.
So that's insane. But on Penaud, the other factor that I think is very relevant is something we haven't brought up, and I think most pundits are sleeping on here, right? It's set to rain right through the first half in Dublin this weekend, and then the weather's going to pick up and clear up a bit in the second half.
Where are you going with this?
So, Ireland's kicking game has changed completely. I think that gives them an edge here. And I think there's been this issue with France, and I think it's a big one, that they don't settle themselves down anymore. Toulouse do. Toulouse do when they're in a difficult game like the Champions Cup final, or if it's raining, or if you look at that game in South Africa when they all look knackered and shattered and they're at altitude. They are capable of setting themselves down, going, no, we've got a good scrum, we've got a good line out, we've got huge forwards, we can carry, we can kick, we can settle things down. France don't play a lot in their own kind of 40 metres from their own line. Once they get up to the halfway line, they broadly always play the same game plan, which is very loose, which is trying to create broken first scenarios, which is putting a lot on Dupont, which is allowing Ntamack to be patient and Dupont to be a genius. And then occasionally, Penaud to do something bullshit as well. Or Ramos, likewise, beat.
Or go into the pick and go and just, again, try and
format.
try and make an unstructured scenario for those guys on the breakdown.
So I think we saw them drop a lot of ball at Twickenham when the ball had been dewy. It stopped raining before kick-off, but the ball was still damp. That could go up again here.
Yeah.
But the other element of this is, right, you are less likely to see the kind of wide balls to Penaud or to Sogbe or whatever that we've seen, allowing for, despite the fact that this Six Nations, the amount of teams playing wide has gone up enormously. When it does get out wide, you're going to have cover across by the time it gets there, generally, right? Like, we're going to
even with the Romain
Ntamack
Ntamack seeds,
we're going to have less space in the wide channels than we'd normally expect. That makes Penaud vital, the way you can cut back in and beat 16 defenders on the way there, and then somehow, you know, beat a 17th even there's not that many players on the pitch. But I think also, like, critically, he's taller, you know, than Sogbe. He's more experienced. He can, if needs be, also be a kicking option, which opens things up for France. I think there's an awful lot of benefits to bringing him in. I do question whether Leo Barry being better in the air might have been a contender for him keeping the fullback shirt. But
he was real good against Italy as well. He was superb,
but then played for Stade Francais at the weekend, you know, where he played extremely well, unsurprisingly. But yeah, France have such depth, and I think there's sometimes a case of them just selecting the best players because why wouldn't you? But actually they do now have the luxury of being able to deploy players that are best at the game plan they're going to play the opposition they're going to face.
That said though, I think the thing you're saying about Toulouse settling down, I would say that the 2 players who are most responsible for when they do that, when they kind of go, okay, let's extend what we usually say is the 40 metres that we don't play in, let's extend that to 60, right? Let's go into their half, force them to make an error, target the scrum, target the line out. You know, you look at Thomas Ramos is one of the players brilliant at that. Blair Kinghorn is the other one who I think is always like really, really on the nose with the game plan.
Why isn't he playing for France?
I don't know, woke nonsense. But the thing is, if he can do it for Toulouse, he can surely do it for France. You know, but you know, I know he gets coached in a different way, but you're right. Like France do struggle to shut down the shop and kind of just go, okay, now's the point where we're just going to try and make the opposition vulnerable rather than do something batshit ourselves and, score a try from 50 metres.
Yeah. The other benefit, though, I think, to the weather conversation, right, is Ireland's kicking game benefits them, but Ireland play a lot of short pot passes. They play a game plan when they are moving the ball that is very built on actually shuffling it along, right, putting it through the hands, getting beyond the second receiver. France play the second least through a second receiver of anyone, which surprised me in the Six Nations.
It's play everything off 9.
Wales. Yeah, exactly, because they play so much off 9. Or someone just crashes it up off Dupont.
Right? Yeah, and offloads or whatever, yeah.
In phase play, France play the most short and close to the ruck carries of anyone. Like 42% of their phases are one-up runners off 9.
Wow.
Within like 10 metres of the ruck.
And one-up runners, that's like a derogatory term.
Yeah. Obviously, they have more to it than that. They have like options and they can pop out the back and so on. But Ireland play a lot more out the back. They play a lot more to width.
All options on for
They
them
play
at all
almost
times.
twice as often to width off one phase of play, like to the far extreme. Far more options are open, as you say, which increases the rate of errors that are potentially there.
Yeah.
France will probably look to kick long, as they have before, as we talked about, and then put pressure on defensively, which may allow them to force some of those errors if the weather does continue as it is.
And I think we've kind of come full circle on this because, in a way, it doesn't matter, like those errors are inevitable, they're going to happen. And yet, if they buy enough tickets to the lottery, eventually, Henshaw's going to crash over from short range or someone like that.
Yeah.
And I think that is what it comes down to. I actually think that it's inevitable again. Like, France are going to score some bullshit tries, It happened at Twickenham when they weren't playing that well, that they still scored those tries just from having the players that they do. That's inevitable. Again, it's inevitable. Ireland are going to make a lot of opportunities and they're going to score some. Will they, I think the big question is, will they buy enough tickets to the lottery? Will they be able to afford enough tickets to the lottery? Will the Prendergast kick bounce enough times that when Pinot tries to kick it back, he slices one that goes into touch 5 metres out and then France can go crash over from there? Will that happen enough times for Ireland is the question.
That's it. And conversely, will France be able to create enough broken field situations? Will they be able to smash the game open, right? The natural state of Test rugby is the way Ireland want it, which is structured and it allows them to slowly pick things apart. France want to blow everything open and open it into being a completely different game. Yeah. Will they be able to do that in turn? Because France are more likely to score a try from 70 metres. There will be a comment saying they stage badly when, bloody Jack Conan runs one in from 90 metres, but whatever.
And he does the spiral kicking.
Yeah. But Ireland have got so good now at controlling possession so that they don't need to be scoring from 70 metres because they count for the same who scored them from 10.
Yeah.
It's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's going to decide the Six Nations one way or another. Even if all it does is the two teams knock each other out, it ends as a draw and England win the championship by default, like the end of Hamlet.
But if they play vaguely like we've described they definitely will, they're such different yet equally entertaining brands of rugby. And I love it when the Six Nations throws up a fixture like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like one who, goes something very broken and one who is the most rigid and structured team that it's like a dress rehearsal, what Ireland do all the time, and it's just incredible seeing those two come up against each other. I could watch them play against each other every weekend.
I love this first game of the weekend as well. Yeah. I love this first one up. You can kind of settle down. You've had your Saturday dinner, which is a very small version of Sunday dinner for anyone that's French up there and doesn't aware that that's a British tradition. Everyone in the comments will back me up and say Saturday dinner is a big thing. And then you settle down and you watch the Six Nations. I almost said the Five Nations then. I was 4 years old when it changed. I almost said the Five Nations. Thank you for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. We did have two videos in fact, on Ireland v Wales that are currently being held in a vault somewhere under my chair. We hope they'll go out at some point, but we've got some issues with some things we're currently running through.
Unforeseen complications.
Yes. You may be able to guess them, but I'm not going to say for the time being. Hopefully we'll be back soon with more stuff. We've got other previews for the other two games going up on the More Squid Rugby channel. We're going to have a look over there. And there's going to be more stuff going around. Hopefully those Wales Island videos will come up soon. Hopefully there'll be more coming next week. But otherwise, we'll see you soon for more
rugby.